All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm going to hand the call over to Andrea, and I'll let her get this call started.
Thank you. Welcome to the Doctor's Call, Tuesday, August 21st, 2018. We tune in each Tuesday at noon Eastern Time to discover some pretty amazing medical or health information and some solutions. I'm Andrea from Michigan. I host the call, and our professional in-house is Dr. Kurt Fisnick. So welcome to the call, Dr. Kurt. We appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for being here each and every week, and thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your day to be here with us. And like Andrea said, I mean, we're trying to share information that we hope will be able to change your life, and information that you can share with other people, and let's help change their lives as well, and maybe decrease somebody's suffering and make it so that they're healthier. So, Andrea, this morning, or I guess this afternoon for you and for everybody on the East Coast, you know, we're going to talk a little bit about blood sugar problems, issues with blood sugar.
Well, there are a lot of people out there affected by that, so I think it's a good topic.
Yeah, it really is. You know, I mean, you remember back in the day when, you know, we were taught the food pyramid, right?
I do.
So now that you know a little bit more about health, and now that you're more knowledgeable on diet, what do you think of the food pyramid?
I think it's a travesty.
Yeah.
I did a little research on it.
Yeah.
The person in the early 60s they assigned to come out with the food pyramid was actually himself doing a high carb diet at the time, and he just decided everyone should be on the same diet.
Really?
Yeah.
So he was doing a high carb diet himself, kind of a radical diet, and he just decided, you know, to put it upon himself to teach everybody that's what you need to do.
Yeah, that's what I understand.
Wow. Kind of crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
You know, and I remember when I was going to school, they taught the food pyramid for those of you that really didn't pay attention or whatever. You remember the base of the pyramid, right? If you look at a pyramid, it's kind of triangular shape with the base being wider and coming to a point up on the top. But on the bottom of the food pyramid, carbohydrates.
Yes.
And really, if you listened to the authorities at that time, they'd pretty much tell you to eat a loaf of bread a day.
Right? 5 grains a day or something like that.
How crazy is that?
Yeah, you know, they were still teaching that when I took my classes for being a health minor at Central Michigan University. I had a nutrition class, and they were still pushing the same old pyramid in the early 90s.
Yeah. Well, and what's crazy is that if you do any reading at all, have you ever found where carbohydrates are considered to be an essential nutrient in anyone's diet?
None. Nope.
Not at all.
The only macronutrient you do not need to survive.
Yeah, it's crazy that they base their whole food pyramid on carbohydrates, and it's not even required in your body for survival.
Right.
You know, and but because of it, back in the 60s, we got this fat phobia.
Mm-hmm.
And everything just developed around this phobia of anything that's fat, that has fat in it. No fat, low fat, all these things. I remember that growing up, and even today.
Yeah, that was based on one man's not real scientific study. You can find a YouTube video about that, and it's called The Big Fat Lie. He went around different countries and checked their diets to kind of make his own theory come to become the truth, that fat was causing heart disease, and anything that didn't line up with his theory, he just threw that information out.
Wow. Yeah. And we had this theory that, or, a lot of people still believe it today. They think that if your diet has excess fat, that's going to turn into the fat in your body.
Right.
You know what happens when you eat too much fat in your diet today, Andrea?
I do.
What happens?
Well, I believe that it turns into ketones and you burn it off as fuel.
Well, actually, it doesn't. If you
No?
if you take in excess fat today, chances are you're going to purge your system, and it's going to come out the other end.
Oh yeah, I recently had that. I recently had that myself.
Right. Right. And that's one of the things that people don't realize. And so, it's your body controls that. But you think about it, with carbohydrates and fats and proteins and things like that, people tend to believe that fat turns into the fat on your body, but really in reality, it's carbohydrates that turn into stored fat.
Yes.
So fat and protein, what's really cool about it is that it has a slow burn rate. It burns as fuel at a slower rate, and so that's gonna help by giving you longer energy. It's not gonna cause the energy spikes.
Right, and it curbs your desire to eat too. It curbs your appetite.
Yeah, it really does, and so you're gonna feel fuller longer,
Mm-hmm.
and you're gonna be healthier. But like, you take a look at carbs, we have something we call the glycemic index. Are you familiar with that, Andrea?
A little bit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the glycemic index, just really, I'm going to simplify it for you, is that how fast does food turn into sugar? How fast does it turn into sugar? What's the burn rate?
Right.
And so if your carbohydrate burns really fast, if it has a fast burn rate, if it's got a high glycemic index, it's going to be quickly assimilated into the body, and it's going to cause a rapid rise in the blood sugar. And what ends up happening is, when you eat foods that have high glycemic index, is that you eat them and it satisfies that sugar craving, but within an hour, guess what? You're hungry again.
Right.
So you want to have a low glycemic index. It's going to, with your foods, you're going to feel fuller longer. You're going to have your blood sugar levels are going to be easier to control. Your cholesterol levels are going to be improved. You're going to have better cognitive function. You're going to have better energy. Your risk of diabetes is going to go down. Your risk of heart disease is going to go down. Your risk of cancer is going to go down.
Sounds like a good plan.
Right? And so, have you ever heard a new word? It's a new word. It's called hangry. Have you ever heard of somebody being hangry?
Oh, yes.
Right? And what do you think of that?
It's a true condition. That's what I think it is.
Yeah, it's a combination of being hungry and angry at the same time. So you're hangry.
Yes.
And I was just doing some reading this morning before I got on the call, and I was just reading up. I always like to kind of, be like Cliff Clavin and bring some important information that, might just seem like trivial stuff. But, blood sugar issues can fuel the fire with an autoimmune thyroid disease.
Really?
Yeah. And so it can cause problems. And what they found is that 50% of people who have Hashimoto's disease have a decreased tolerance to carbohydrates. So if they eat carbohydrates, it rapidly increases the blood sugar, it rapidly increases the insulin, and it causes them to be hangry.
I see.
And so one of the top prescribed medicines in the United States is actually thyroid medication.
It is.
Right? So if we start thinking about all of this, we start, one of the things that I do is I start looking, I go, that's interesting, right? So if 50% of people, if greater than 50% of people in the country have an issue with blood sugar, dysglycemia, and if 50% of people if one of the top prescribed medicines is thyroid disease, maybe there's a relationship to that.
Well, I would think so. It seems like everything in the body does a full circle somewhere, right?
There's got to be some kind of connection, right? And so we started looking at that, and boy, I tell you, when was it that we started pushing all the carbohydrates? I mean, was it just in the 60s or was it before that?
It was a little bit before that, but what really triggered it was, of course, the food industry making carbs more available all over the country, through grocery stores and that switch from people growing their own food and storing potatoes and carrots and apples and stuff in their basement all winter because they didn't have it available to making it available everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really got to be an issue. I was listening to a video by Suzanne Summers. You remember Suzanne Summers?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she had that TV show where she was kind of a ditzy blonde, but when you listen to her talk about health, she's really actually quite intelligent.
Yeah, she has made that her passion.
Yeah. And she talks about how 10,000 years ago, whatever, we as the human race, we didn't have all the carbohydrates, like Andrea just said. Harvest season, this time of year, we'd have grains and we'd have the fruit that was on the apple trees or the pear trees or whatever it happened to be, and we could store as much as we could. But really, by springtime, most of the stored fruit and things like that you had, it was eaten up, right?
Correct.
And then on top of it, there might be a winter where it was a really, really bad winter. That happened occasionally back then, right?
Yes.
And not everybody had a good home like we do now with solid walls and houses. If you look at some of these houses, some of these old log cabins and stuff, they weren't sealed up all that good, and they didn't have ready supply of fuel oil and natural gas and things like that to heat their house. And so what happened is that people would get really cold and they'd freeze to death, and there was like food, if they had a bad year, there'd be a great famine. And what happened is that genetics were altered, and there's a reason I'm bringing this up, but the genetics were altered, and the people, your relatives that couldn't survive in a environment where there was a not plentiful food, not a plentiful source of fuel to eat, and maybe really cold because of the winter or whatever. But what happened is that side of your family perished, and so the people that survived, the genetics that was passed on was what they called a thrifty genotype. You ever heard that term, Andrea?
I have not heard that before.
Yeah, so a thrifty genotype basically was passed on from generation to generation to generation then, because your your non-thrifty relatives, well, they died. So you couldn't pass on their genes. So over the course of time then, what happened is that if you put a person with a thrifty genotype into an environment with lots of food, lots of high glycemic foods like carbohydrates, like breads and pastas and cereals and things like that, what happens to the human body when you do that?
Well, I would imagine that, I read a study about people from the Philippines coming to Hawaii and changing their diet to a more Western diet, and they all developed diabetes.
Yeah, they developed diabetes, they got obese, they got fat, because in a thrifty genotype type of a person, what was passed on by my relatives from years and years ago, because somewhere along the chain, my relatives went through a great famine, and so what happened is that their body was able to kind of, and it's probably not real accurate, but almost like they went into hibernation. They were able to decrease their metabolism, and they were able to survive. But you, like Andrea was just saying, you put them into an environment like what we have today, and all of a sudden, now we have some issues. We have some blood sugar issues. We have some issues with obesity and all these different things. Well, like Suzanne Summers talks about on her video. Well, you think about it, with transportation, we can haul food. We can haul fresh fruits and vegetables from the southern hemisphere up here to the North Country where I live, Fargo, North Dakota. We can haul all that stuff up here in the middle of winter. I mean,
Right?
there's no fresh fruits and vegetables growing in North Dakota when it's 30 below zero.
Exactly.
But I can run to the grocery store just down the street, and I can buy a fresh banana. Looks like it was just picked off the tree yesterday.
Yeah, you can even buy exotic vegetable or fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, things that we never heard of up here. I mean, fruits and vegetables that I'm finding out about fruits and vegetables from friends of mine. They're going, have you ever tried this fruit? And I'm like, what? They invented a new fruit? When? Right? And so it's kind of crazy. But anyhow, so there's the issue. There's the issue, right? And so what happens is that we have an issue. Our body can't handle all the different foods and things like that. And so it's your environment and it's your genetics mixed with your environment. That's the problem. That's the problem. And so if we can take and just get people to realize that, okay, so let's go back and let's try and figure out, if I've got this genotype, if I've got this genetic makeup of my body, I've got these different single nucleotide polymorphisms, or what we call SNPs in my body, and mistakes, that were passed on from generation to generation to generation, right? If I can take and really just go, okay, so I need to create the environment for my genetics. All of a sudden now, I can live longer, I can live healthier, and all of this. But so we look at what happens initially when somebody has too much blood sugar. Too much blood sugar. It's considered to be the high level is 130 milligrams per deciliter, right? That's a fasting blood sugar level. If you're postprandial, which means after you eat, if it's above 180 milligrams per deciliter, then it's considered to be high. But what happens is that if you have too many carbs and your blood sugar goes up, it damages the nerves. We've heard of diabetic neuropathy.
Yeah.
Right? It damages the blood vessels because it causes issues, and it damages the organs. And issues that we see, when people have too high a blood sugar, they're stressed out all the time. They're sick all the time. They seem to have infections. They're, you know, they have increased thirst. They have headaches. They have trouble concentrating. They have blurred vision. They have weight loss, believe it or not, weight loss. But check this out. When you look up hypoglycemia, which is low blood sugar, what are the symptoms of that? Check this out. The symptoms are pretty much the same. You have mood problems. You have headaches. You have trouble thinking, cognitive issues. You have blurry vision. So when you look at that, the symptoms are the same when you have high or low. And so how do you know? How do people know? And when people start losing weight, they might go, hey, you know, that's great. I'm losing weight. But it may not be all that healthy for them. So we start looking at some of these issues, and we start looking at diabetes. We start looking at insulin. And insulin is really probably a way of thinking of it. It's kind of like that key that unlocks your cells, and it opens up the part of the cell that allows sugar, blood sugar, to be used as energy.
Right.
And so if you have an issue with your insulin levels, you know, maybe it's gonna cause some problems, right?
Yeah, and when you're actually burning fat as fuel, you don't need insulin.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. So maybe what we need to do is we need to re-educate people. And where do we start? Well, Andrea, it's interesting. I was just out in Montana last week. I came home on Sunday. And on Saturday, I met with my friend's brother, and he's Native American. Mm-hmm. and Finnish. He's half Native American, half Finlander, right?
Okay.
So where's Finland located on the map on the globe?
North of England, I think, a little bit.
Way up in Scandinavia, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got to imagine that the people who grew up in that part of the world, they probably got some relatives who went through a great famine, because you know, you get up that far north, it's got to get cold in the winter, right?
Exactly.
So you combine, you know, Native American with Finlander, with Finnish, and you're going to have some issues. So without even having to do his genetic test, I can tell him that he's probably got the thrifty genotype.
Right. You know, we have the same thing here in Central Michigan. We are actually on a reservation where I live. And the local tribal people here all have a very bad issue with diabetes, and a lot of the tribe are overweight. Even the children are extremely overweight here. Yeah. So it makes sense what you're saying.
Yeah. So we take a look at that and we go, okay, let's look at this from a genetic viewpoint, and let's look at it from a environmental viewpoint. Let's take and what did I tell my friend's brother? I said, well, let's change your environment. Let's change what you're eating. And I told him, here's what you want to do is you got to realize that, you know, how did your relatives eat? Your relatives hundreds of years ago, how did they eat? And I said, that's what you want to go back to eating. And he said, oh, no, that's not what his doctor told him. His doctor told him that he wants to be eating carbohydrates all day long.
Salad.
Oh, no, bread.
Oh, bread. Oh, my God.
And I just kind of looked at him and I shook my head and I said, does your doctor hate you? Is he trying to kill you?
Yeah. Well, you know, he had 2 weeks of nutrition in medical school. So.
Yeah. And that's what they learned. And maybe, you know, this doctor was educated back in the 1960s when the food pyramid was first invented, you know, and that. But, you know, bottom line is that, okay, so folks, you listen to me talk and you're going, okay, you know, yeah, that makes sense. But what happens when you initially start cutting back on the carbohydrates, right? And people start, you know, getting the shakes and they have these symptoms of hypoglycemia. And so then to them, how do they solve the issues? Well, they eat a candy bar.
Right.
Or they drink some orange juice, and all of a sudden they go, oh yeah, Kurt's wrong. My doctor's right. I do need to be eating sugars all day long. And that's the problem, because what happens is when you start coming down from that sugar high, you're going to have some withdrawals, because if you read some of the information out there, sugar is considered a toxin. It's considered a poison. If it was invented today, if I invented glucose, it would be listed as a drug. It'd be a Schedule 3 drug. It'd be regulated.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So then I asked him, okay, so do you drink soda? He said, yeah, but I only drink diet soda. Right. And I said, really? I said, when you drink diet soda, let me explain a couple things about it. When you drink diet soda, it's got a sweetener in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so even the thought of drinking something or eating something sweet causes your body to start producing hormones and insulin and things like that. Just the thought of it.
Right.
And then when you consume it, and you consume this NutraSweet, this aspartame, these things, what it does, as soon as it hits your tongue, it tells your body that you're going to be getting sugar.
Right.
But guess what? You don't deliver the sugar. And so now, aren't you going to cause a hormonal issue?
I would think.
Right? Yeah, you're definitely going to cause an issue. So isn't it just as bad to have the sugar as to trick your body into thinking it's going to have the sugar?
It is. Well, then on top of that is you're putting a chemical substitute for sugar in your body that your body doesn't have any idea what to do with.
Yeah.
And didn't I see information about 1 can of soda? It's like leaching minerals out of your bones when you drink diet soda.
Well, and that's because of the pH, but that's a whole nother story.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and we could discuss all the toxins, the toxicity issues on another call, but
Right.
bottom line is that, so like Andrea's saying, so here we get all this NutraSweet, this aspartame, this whatever we're using, and the body doesn't know what it is. It's expecting sugar, but it's not getting sugar because you're tricking your body. And so what does it do? Well, it takes and it stores it into fat cells.
Oh.
So now you have all these toxins they're stored in the fat cells, and that's a topic for another discussion. And we could sit here and go through all this stuff, and I'm looking at the time just going, man, Andrea, there's a lot of things that we need to talk about with this. But so let's kind of wrap this up by just telling people, so we've kind of given you the background, right? You've got a genotype, you've got a mistake in your DNA, and it was created because of, something that happened hundreds of years ago, and to your relatives, hundreds of years ago, and it was passed on. And so those things pass on, and they say that some of the genetic issues from way back in Egyptian times, or way back in the time of Adam and Eve, or way back in the time of caveman, or whatever you want to talk about, those genetic issues from hundreds or thousands of years ago still haven't been corrected. We haven't evolved. And that's hundreds, maybe thousands of years. We haven't evolved to handle the current diet. We haven't evolved to be able to even handle dairy or wheat and things like that. And now all of a sudden we're throwing all these chemical things in. How many hundreds or thousands of years is it going to take to evolve, for the human race to evolve to handle the new stuff? And
Right.
it gets to be a whole topic of discussion. But so what we're going to talk about real quickly here is that, so what can you do to balance your blood sugar levels. Well, I'm going to go through this rather quickly because, I'm looking at the time and I try and keep this to a half hour, maybe a 40-minute call. But so what you want to do is you want to increase the amount of fats and the proteins that you take in your body every day. And you don't want to just eat any old fat. You want to have good fats. You want to have fats that your body can use. You want to have the essential fats. And so if we take a look at like typically grown animals like chickens and beef cattle and things like that, most of that's not good fat. That's bad fat. And bad fat causes inflammation. It causes issues of its own. And again, that's another topic of discussion. But so you want to take and you want to have good fats, nuts and seeds and fish and grass-fed, green-finished, wild game that's got a balance of the good fats. And you want to try, when you have a carbohydrate, you never want to eat a carbohydrate by itself. You want to have a carbohydrate mixed with, fats or proteins. And definitely don't eat any sweets before you go to bed at night. Like, so if, I always try and tell people, try and eat your evening meal around 6 o'clock but don't eat any carbohydrates after that. Don't eat any sweets after that. And I try and tell people, don't drink fruit juices. A lot of people think, well, I'm not going to drink soda, but I'm going to drink this, this sugary flavored cranberry juice, right? And they think, that they're getting something that's better for them. Well, yeah, that's probably a little better, but you want to eat whole fruits. Like right now, apples are coming in season in my area, up in the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, pears and things like that. You want to kind of watch your caffeine intake because that's going to cause problems. You want to decrease your grains and your dairy and your soy and your corn, especially the corn. Holy cow, corn, that's another subject of discussion. And eat snacks that are loaded with good protein and good fat. And watch the glycemic index. Learn to watch glycemic index and try and lower the amount of foods that you eat that have a glycemic index greater than 55. I like intermittent fasting. I think intermittent fasting at least twice a week, but I'd say probably even more than that, 3 times a week. And what's intermittent fasting? Well, that's when you don't eat for periods of 18 hours at a time. And so some people say, oh, I can't do that. You do it anyhow. You just don't call it intermittent fasting. You just call it life. And what intermittent fasting is you eat your meal at 6 o'clock and then you don't eat again until noon the next day.
Right.
That's intermittent fasting. That's 18 hours without eating. That's intermittent fasting. What if you did that 2 to 3 times per week? Who couldn't do that? And then, like I said, just, never eat a carb without a fat or a protein. And, if you read Dr. Mark Hyman's book, The Blood Sugar Solution, he'll talk about decreasing dairy. Type 1 diabetes is related to dairy because there's variants in the type of casein. There's casein A1, casein A2, and it can trigger problems with the beta cells of the pancreas and trigger an autoimmune response. Some experts are saying that don't give your baby any dairy, cow's milk, until after their first birthday. And because it can trigger that autoimmune thing. But anyhow, as far as like the Sizzle lineup, the Super Omega Plus is such a great product. It's got the fats and I recommend, taking the Super Omega Plus every single day. And even with that, I try and tell people that, even that, to me, that's not enough of the essential omegas. You gotta do more than that even. And so, make sure that you include it in your diet and that'll help. The Sizzling is a great product because it uses whey proteins and they're processed in a way that's it's going to make it so that your body will burn fat as energy and it'll help balance out the sugars. So I like the Sizzling. It's low in sugar content, where most protein shakes, they're made improperly, and then they add sugars and sweeteners to it that can cause issues like we were talking about. And and then we take a look at fucoidan. Fucoidan itself has some great properties that it'll help make it so that your body can process sugars properly, right? An extract from seaweed will help your body's process sugars properly. So that's something nice to know. And then of course, the age pill, anti-glycation extreme, right? And so Andrea, what's glycation? What would be a quick definition that you could give people?
Oh, that is a plaque that builds up in your cells from actually burning sugar.
Yeah. And so as you burn sugar as energy, excess sugar, what it does, it sugar coats the protein. And so I always kind of explain to people, like, think of it like this. You go to the restaurant tonight and you order chicken strips. As you order those chicken strips, they have a breading on them. In your body, correlate that breading with glycation. You're putting a breading on your protein. Not good. Not good. Right?
Right.
So anyhow, that's kind of the talk for today. I'm looking at time. I apologize. I've gone over time by about 7 minutes. So Andrea, I'm going to let you close out the call, and everyone, share this with people. Get the knowledge out there. Get people to understand that there's some things we can do, and it's not just adding products. Sometimes it's making changes. So Andrea, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. I do have a closing thought here. As you were discussing things like intermittent fasting and, changing the diet and stuff, I kind of did a flashback in my brain of when I was a lot more addicted to sugar than I am now. And there was like several years in my life where I craved food all day long. And I know there's people out there listening to this call and they're going, but I'm hungry all day. I want to stuff food in my mouth all day long. And I used to be like that. And I just want to encourage them to have an understanding that as they start to maybe study ketosis on YouTube or keto, I know that's a hot topic right now, and it's actually eating more fats, becoming a fat burner instead of a sugar burner, it's going to kill that hunger craving that you've been suffering with. It's really going to put it in its place, and you'll be able to control and not be controlled by eating all day. So that's an encouraging thing. I hope helps somebody out there. So we do work with a company, Doc and me and several other people, that's called Sizzle International. It's headed by a biochemist who's been making his life mission non-toxic and very effective products for close to 30 years. So it's not like he just jumped on this non-toxic bandwagon that everybody's on in the last couple of years. This has been his life passion for many, many years. And so you probably saw this message to hop on this call, or a friend invited you. So what I would recommend is to get back with that person and ask them to show you resources for the products that we may have discussed today, and even more products that we have available that would help you to begin to anti-age and shut down decay and degeneration and restore your body. So thank you for being on the call today. We hope you join us next Tuesday. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Andrea.